of the Qur'an, revelation and codification, oral and written. The Arabic word used for revelation is anzala or nazala. At least this is the verb. Nazala, nazul, also is more the noun, that which is sent down. So this word nazala literally means to send down. So that which is on high, the words, the truth, the criterion, that which distinguishes between truth and error. This is seen as being sent down from on high down to the world of men via a mediator. So as we've seen in other PowerPoint presentations, Muhammad sees himself as a human being receiving a message from God through a mediation, like previous prophets, that each one received a mediating power, communicating power, something of an angel or a spirit of holiness, which communicates the message from God to the human messenger or prophet, who then discloses or proclaims that message to the people. Muhammad's encounter with revelation. From the Quran and from Hadith, we can say that Muhammad would receive the revelation through visions, as well as through dreams, as well as through waking life. Muhammad does also see God and seems to have a one-to-one encounter with God in his night journey, his Miraj and Isra. He also sees God's messenger Gabriel and talks to him and dialogues with him and receives the revelation from that angel. Within the Quran itself, talks of God communicating with human beings or with his prophet or messenger from behind a veil, that there's some sort of partition which separates the messenger or prophet from the free, the unhampered glory of God in all his majesty. So this verse from Quran 42:51, okay, Surah 42, Ayat 51. It is not fitting for any human being that God should speak to him except by inspiration, or from behind a veil or partition, or by sending a messenger or prophet to reveal by his permission what he will. In these hadith, it tells of Muhammad or the prophet receiving the revelation from God through an angel, and the angel being like a human being talking and communicating the message as if perhaps in a regular dialogue or conversation, or you can almost think of it as a teleprompter in which the angel is speaking to the prophet and telling the prophet of what to say. This is at least the impression we get from how these two hadith are worded. This one from the collection of hadith from Al-Bukhari. It's from volume 1, book 1, number 2. It says, "Sometimes the angel comes in the form of a man and talks to me, and I grasp whatever he says." Okay, this is the Prophet Muhammad saying that an angel comes like a man. He talks to me. It's like a great conversation. I grasp what he communicates to him. Ostensibly, he's speaking in Arabic or whatever language the Prophet understands. And this one from volume 1, book 1, number 4 from Al-Bukhari. And this isn't the Prophet speaking, but a companion of the Prophet talking about what he understood would happen with the Prophet Muhammad. So, narrated Sayyid bin Jubair, Ibn Abbas said, Allah's apostle, this is Muhammad, used to listen to Gabriel whenever he came, and after his departure he used to recite it as Gabriel had recited it. Okay, so this is very much this kind of teleprompter impression you might get of what's happening with Revelation. And this is how most Muslims understand what the process of revelation was, that there's this eternal book or holy tablet with God, and these words are communicated. Angel Gabriel speaks in the beautiful Arabic, the words of God, and Muhammad repeats these words. He's commanded to read or recite or proclaim this tablet, and Muhammad proclaims it aloud to the people. Okay, so what he proclaims aloud is one the same as what is given to him by the angel. What the angel proclaims is one the same as the holy tablet, which is with God. They're exactly the same thing. However, we can get other impressions of what this process of inspiration, revelation is via other verses from the Quran and other hadith. For some, like a great scholar of Islam who worked at the University of Chicago for many years and wrote many books, a Pakistani Muslim scholar of Islam named Fazlur Rahman, he said that the process of revelation was more an inspiration which is given to the Prophet Muhammad's heart. And then Prophet Muhammad must interpret, translate that inspiration into human words. And the human words that can't come out, this is the revelation of the Quran. Okay, so there's a non-verbal, okay, communication that's given. This holy tablet isn't in any particular human language, whether Arabic, English, Hebrew, Sanskrit, or whatever, but rather it is the prophet's place and position to articulate that inspiration with human language. Okay, so we can get this impression, for example, in another hadith from Al-Bukhari, or when the Al-Bukhari collected, similar area of the book, volume 1, book 1, number 2, as the ones we saw before. So narrated Aisha, the wife of Muhammad. Al-Harith ibn Hisham asked Allah's apostle, "O Allah's apostle, how is the divine inspiration revealed to you?" Allah's apostle replied, "Sometimes it is revealed like the ringing of a bell. This form of inspiration is the hardest of all, and then this state passes off after I have grasped what is inspired." Aisha added, "Verily I saw the Prophet being inspired divinely on a very cold day, and noticed the sweat drooping from his forehead." So this is more of a kind of pressure and inspiration, a ringing of a bell, some sort of very intense process of feeling the truth, what he sees as the divine truth, and then trying to process it and re-articulate it as in human language. The other word beside nazala or nazul or anzala for revelation is the word wahy. And wahy literally means to reveal, to suggest, or perhaps even more precisely, to inspire. And Quran 297 speaks of bringing down revelation to the heart. That's inspiration that's given to the heart of the Prophet rather than, say, the physical air that he, or even a mental air that he's spoken to as if like a internal air that you might listen with in a dream, right? You don't actually use your physical air in your dream, but you still hear stuff. All right, this is more of an inspiration to the heart. So wahy means to suggest to the heart, to reveal to the heart, to indicate. Quran 16:68 speaks of God suggesting or inspiring, and this word wahy is used, to the bee to take houses for herself in the hills and trees and the arbors which men erect. Okay, so how and where to make houses, God inspires animals, including the bee, and what to do, how to conduct its life to be successful. Quran 99:2-5, God will suggest to the earth to give up its burdens. Okay, so the earth itself is also the recipient of inspiration. Thus, wahy means the communication of an idea by some quick suggestion or prompting, or by a flash of inspiration. This word wahy that's used for the process of revelation indicates even much more clearly than the word nazul, nazala, inzal, that which the prophet or messenger such as Muhammad receives isn't a verbal Arabic, but rather a insight or truth or vision which his heart feels and must be rearticulated with human language. Nonetheless, what is the interpretation of this debate that became prominent among Muslims. How do Muslims themselves define the Quran? Muslims define the Quran as the literal words of God sent down upon Muhammad through the angel Gabriel and other means, its precise meaning and precise wording. We can even add in its precise Arabic. Okay, transmitted by numerous persons both verbally and writing. So once Muhammad articulates it, okay, numerous followers would transmit it verbally as well as in writing in one generation after the next after Muhammad dies. Muslims see the Quran as inimitable and unique, protected by God from corruption. Okay, whereas they see the Torah of the Jews and the Evangel, or Injil they call it, the New Testament in other words, of the Christians. These older revelations are revelations from God, but have been corrupted. Human beings have imposed their own desires and wishes within the book, and things have been changed and modified, and it's not completely reliable according to a prominent Muslim vision of things. Meanwhile, they'll see their own Quran as unique and protected from God from corruption. That it's one and the same Quran, hasn't been changed or modified in its 1400-year history. That which Muhammad spoke aloud, okay, in 610 to 632 CE, that is one and the same thing that is recited and chanted aloud by Muslims in 2016. By inimitable, I mean, is the same idea that has been referred to in previous PowerPoints, in which you cannot imitate or create the like of the Quran, so exalted and wondrous it is in its distinguishing characteristics. Commonly given evidence by Muslims for the miraculousness of the Quran is that an unlettered, or shall we say illiterate, person gave this amazing book, which has been, along with the Bible, we can say, the best-selling book and the most central and popular book in last 2,000 years of human history. Yet other scholars are skeptical with a claim of the complete illiteracy of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay. They point out that in this mercantile atmosphere, okay, buying and selling by merchants, that there's records of transactions that have been found, right? The merchants would commonly rely upon notes and papers to keep track of their merchandise, to remember how much they had sold, how much they had sold it for, how much stock they have left, right? These sort of practical matters of running a business. The merchants wouldn't just rely upon their brains, but would often keep notes as well. The Quran itself, in the 96th chapter, verse or ayat number 4, speaks of God teaching man by the pen what he did not know. So the use of the pen, at least in the mind of Muhammad, is something that was evident and everyday matter. This is a way to learn and to teach and record human knowledge is by the pen. Okay, so perhaps he too would use a pen to some degree or another. Scholars also point out that inscriptions have been found in the Nabatean, Layanic, and Thamudic alphabets around the areas in which Muhammad has lived, right? And so there were alphabets, inscriptions. The writing wasn't a completely uncommon feature of life in that area. So the word for the illiteracy of Muhammad, UMMY, the traditional view of this word UMMY is that Muhammad could neither read nor write, and this was given to enhance the miraculous and divine nature of the Quran. An unlettered person gave this wonderful book. However, so there's verses from the Quran that refer to him as this illiterate, this UMMY prophet, right? However, the word UMMY is a little bit more ambiguous in its significance. It can mean the people could neither read nor write, or it can mean the people without written scriptures. Those are also UMMY, or it can mean the non-Jewish or Gentile. Okay, belonging to the Arab community or Ummah. Okay, so Muhammad, being ignorant of the Jewish and Christian scriptures, would make him an Ummi. Okay, so it could be that he could neither read or write, or it could mean that he was part of the people without written scriptures, or that he was ignorant of the particular Jewish and Christian scriptures. Right? Which meaning that was meant, okay, it's not exactly known, but speculated. One of the great Western scholars of Islam, man that lived and wrote during much of the 20th century from Scotland, a guy named Montgomery Watt. He said that there's nothing in the early histories of Islam or within the Quran itself that implies that Muhammad had no knowledge of reading and writing. And most non-Muslim scholars believe that even if he wasn't a fluent, strong reader and writer, he most likely had at least some basic skills with it. So they conclude that Muhammad could read and write as much as the average merchant in Mecca. Probably not a lot, but um, not not at all either. And Montgomery Watt asserts that Muhammad was most likely would have been considered and been a cultured person by the standards of Mecca in his time, right? A man who sought knowledge and learning and had a reasonable amount for his time and place. However, there's little evidence that suggests that Muhammad himself wrote something. He employed secretaries to take notes for him, to write letters for him, to write down the Quran. Okay, his adopted son Zayd is among these. His was also a very early believer in Islam. His son-in-law and cousin Ali was among these. Okay. Uthman, who became the third caliph, was among these. Muawiyah, Ubay ibn Ka'ib. These were all among his secretaries. And we take a literal interpretation of Quran 31:27. We would think that part of the very immediate process of revelation is the writing down of the words with ink and pen. People from Europe and North America are often suspicious of oral traditions or words and stories that are passed down from one generation to the next orally. And a person might point to the phone game in which you whisper into the ear of a friend who whispers in the ear of another friend to another friend, and by the time it gets back to you, it sounds nothing like what you originally whispered into your first friend's ear, right? And so it becomes a big question to identify and try to establish whether a book, okay, in this case the Quran, is the same thing as that which was given by Muhammad, or perhaps it was changed as it was orally passed down. It's important to help you answer this question when and how the first copies of the Quran were written down. Okay, so according to one hadith, it says that the first collection of the Quran was made by Muhammad's adopted son Zayd ibn Zabit just after Muhammad died in the first caliphate, the caliphate of Abu Bakr. It was and this collection was made from his own memories of companions he trusted, and from pieces of parchment or papyrus in which the Quran was written on, from flat stones, palm leaves, shoulder blades, and ribs of animals, pieces of leather, and wooden boards. Okay, in other words, whatever was a resource in one's environment in which one could write down the Quran, that in fact was used to write down these words, and from these many different sources, Zayd is said to have created the first complete collection of the entirety of that which Muhammad revealed as the Quran. However, most histories report that it wasn't until the third caliph, Uthman, who ruled from 644 to 656, that the Quran was standardized. Okay, and its ordering was also standardized, right? So the chronology, the structure. Okay, Uthman also ordered the destruction of other extant copies. So whenever there's a Quran that differed from this official copy that was made during his time of rulership, those copies were destroyed. So there'd just be one universal representation of what Muhammad revealed. And it's said that this standard Quran was based largely on the work of Zayd 10 years before him. However, it is difficult for some scholars to believe that the written copies of the Quran indeed go back to the 7th century, just because it's hard to to establish that any copies of the Quran were actually made in the 7th century. This page here, for example, most scholars believe that doesn't quite go back then. It only goes back to the 8th century or the 700s, although some scholars might push for a 7th century date for it. 8th century is the more commonplace view for it. And this refers to the 20 verses from the 21st chapter of the Quran. Meanwhile, here from the 9th century is one of the oldest complete copies of the Quran that have been found. Okay. Some allege that it's a 7th century original. Okay. In addition, that was made official by Uthman. But this is disputed since it is written in a kind of script called Kufic that is believed to have not developed for 100 years or more after the Quran was first revealed in the 7th century and first written down in the 7th century. So is it indeed a problem that Muslims had a crude writing system and that we don't have a legacy or missing links that go all the way back to the time of Muhammad? By crude writing system, I mean that even the old Qurans from the 8th century or 9th century, right? These Qurans were at most hints and reminders for what to say in the Quran, unless you had it actually memorized. You can actually sound it out phonetically what to say, what the Quran was. Okay, that is because there is shapes that represented a range of letters, but only dots would be put on those shapes that could distinguish that shape between 3 to 5 different possible letters. Okay, so a half circle, such as the smile of a happy face, right? This smile of a happy face would be left alone. Only later in the late 9th and then 10th century were dots added, so you could distinguish this half circle from a range of different letters that smiley face before then could have been a b sound, could have been a n sound, could have been a y sound, could have been a t sound, or could have been a the sound, right? So this is what I mean by a crude writing system, right? But this is not these missing links or the crude writing system isn't seen as problematic for most Muslims because of the practice of memorizing the entirety of the Quran that goes back to the days of Muhammad, according to the oral traditions, that there were numerous companions, followers of Muhammad, that would use their great memories, their great brains that were used to memorize the great poetry of the day. Instead of focusing on the poetry, they would focus on memorizing the beautiful, elegant, soul-stirring words that were revealed by Muhammad. And perhaps they had more time and brain power to do this without having to remember passwords for websites or lines from your favorite TV show, right? You could focus your memory on remember the Quran itself, right? And so a Hafiz would have the entirety of the Quran memorized, and this was passed down and taught from one generation to the next by master reciters and master memorizers who would teach the next generation how to recite it until they could recite it with a perfect pronunciation without faltering in their memory of what it is. Indeed, the Muslims have always seen the Quran as first and foremost that which is recited aloud, and the physical copy of the text, right, has always been no more than a poor imitation of that which is recited aloud and taught orally from one generation to the next. So in conclusion, the Quran was revealed to Muhammad in different ways and written down for about 23 years in Mecca and Medina, but was not codified until the eras of the caliphs after him. Secondly, the Quran was primarily oral, but was written for the sake of preservation for future generations. And this practice of doing their best to make better and better written imitations of the Arabic sounds that are produced. This goes back to the days of Muhammad, the days of his first generation after him, and Muslims kept on working on that to create more and more accurate as well as beautiful ways to write down or represent in written form these words that are spoken, articulated, chanted, recited.